Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining another episode of Designing for the Desert with Green Grid Designs. I'm Udit Methila, and today we are privileged to have Debisha Sharma, an environmental and social consultant specializing in wastewater circularity, ESG, and urban resilience. Devisha has led projects from South Asia, Africa, and the Middle East and brings practical, on ground experience in making reuse and nature based solutions work even in constrained contexts. Her presentation will draw on case studies from India, Tanzania, and Afghanistan and explores how those lessons could apply here in the UAE. Today, we look at practical steps for wastewater reuse, the role of decentralized and nature based systems, key social and institutional barriers, and how reuse can improve water security, microclimates, and community resilience. So, please join me in welcoming Debisha.
Thank you, Udit, and thanks for inviting me over. It's great that you are having conversations and which are like relaxed and we are exploring one topic at a time. So that's a great format you have started, and thank you for having me over. So, hello everyone, this is Debisha. So, I come from a very unique background. I am one of the social sciences person who have transitioned fully into environmental field. Is it working? Just sorry. So I work in the environmental design field, but I come from a humanities and public policy background. So what I bring together is how do we hold the communities at the center of it, bring the technical expertise, but how do we make it work for the communities? So that has been my focus all throughout. I will start with my presentation. Uh, yeah, is it visible? It is visible,
Yes,
right?
it's visible
Perfect.
now.
Perfect. So today I will delve into one of the verticals that I have worked extensively, that is circularity in wastewater management, the nature way. And just to introduce about me, I wear many hats. I have been into technical and social researches when it comes to wash and waste management, as well as overall making public health and uh, environment come together for it to work for different kinds of communities. I have worked as a consultant, as a manager, as a trainer, and as a communicator. So the kind of sectors I have worked on, majorly it has been wash or water sanitation and hygiene. Within that, one important part of my work has been ensuring dignified work environment for the sanitation workers. Something that is very important on the kind of context I have worked, that is the South Asia and places like Tanzania and Afghanistan. So it's a lot of things to do with where how do we help those frontline workers to do their job better, but at the same time getting them their due recognition as part of the larger community. Then in waste management as well as in UAE, my work has been more into integrating the element of water and promoting the whole green designs as a part of the green building concept. So my work has allowed me to create impact in a number of SDGs. From SDG 6 has been at the core of my work, but also there is a strong element of gender equality as part of water access and sanitation access. Then we are talking about, as I covered, the decent work. Uh, a core part of building infrastructure as appropriate to the context. So that has allowed me to contribute to the whole infrastructure and ensuring sustainable communities and cities. As part of waste management, we are talking about contributing towards the circularity and recyclability. And of course, there is a direct impact on the public health as well as the climate action. So today I'm just going to talk about one particular aspect, that is the wastewater circularity. Just to set the context, we are talking about a time when more than 25 countries are exposed to extreme water stress. That's one. But as you can see, most of these countries on the world they are facing some or the other kind of water stress. What this map is not telling you that even the places which are, say, low to medium kind of water stress, even they have water issues. That will be seasonal. They will be, say, the water is trapped in inaccessible places like the ice caps. So even though it might appear as low water risk, but still even these countries have seasonal variations of water. Even they have water that is available but not necessarily accessible. In this context, we are talking about how do we make use of the limited water that we have, and how do we use it more for the same amount. So a good case for wastewater management and using the wastewater is, of course, enhancing the amount of water that is available for use, optimizing the use for non-potable users. Unfortunately, even now we have a lot of places which use fresh water for things like car washing, for things like flushing and cooling and construction and landscaping, some things where water quality need not be of the drinking level standards, but yet because reuse is not emphasized that much, we have seen in many contexts that water, the fresh water that is treated by spending a lot of money, that is used for even these non-potable purposes. And of course, the nutrient recovery, wastewater, because it's derived from human waste, you do have a lot of nutrients, particularly the NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, which is very important for improving the soil, primarily for improving the soil yield and soil quality. And given all of this benefit, yet we do have a situation where 80% of the wastewater just flows back into the environment without proper treatment. Some barriers towards wastewater. One is that there is lack of trust on quality and treatment. Just to give you one context, few years back, I was talking to a friend who works in construction, and then they were saying that, hey, while we can use wastewater for construction, we will not like to because we don't trust the quality that comes out of the STP. So the very at the core, there is lack of trust. There is, of course, just to treat the water, you need a lot of finances. In many places, we have seen that because places like India, they're very densely populated. So the cities are expanding and land is very premium. So the places where you'd be locating this sewage treatment plant, while they are at the safe distance from the habitation, they may not be at a place where it is out of sight, out of mind. As a result, if somebody in the vicinity, they know, oh, there is a wastewater treatment plant that is happening maybe in a kilometer away from my place, they always have this fear of their land value going down. And they have this notion of not in my backyard. I want it to be treated, it's good for the environment, but I don't want it close to my place. And of course, you have the space constraints and the design issues, especially if wastewater treatment is not integrated from the very beginning of whether it's city planning or community planning or even planning at a building level. If it's not integrated from the very beginning, it's very difficult to integrate it at a later stage. So where does it leave us? This brings us to the whole concept of multi-pronged approach for wastewater and circularity. What does it mean? We are having a context of a city where there will be, especially the kind of context I'm talking about, the historical communities, say in South Asia, in Tanzania, in Afghanistan, where people have lived for a long time. And these are very rapidly expanding urban centers. It will always happen because of the organic growth. You will have some places which are having some bit of infrastructure, maybe a seaward infrastructure, maybe a septic tank or a pit latrine infrastructure. Then there will be places which are, say, connected to a grid, which are off grid, as you can see, which have to be serviced in a different way. There is unmet water demand. There is always water is available only for a particular duration of the time, the supply water. Sometimes there is no supply water. People are dependent on bore wells. So there is a huge unmet water demand in the urban areas. There is high cost of centralizing the whole infrastructure at one go. And there's always budget limitations. At the same time, we are also talking about a context in which the peri-urban and the rural areas, they need, because they are facing a lot of stress on the soil to supply for the entire growing population, they need soil amendments. They are in strong need of soil amendments, and currently they are only dependent on the chemical fertilizers. There is a need to ensure that the soil is able to perform optimally, but not really. There need not be any kind of degradation into the soil from the chemical fertilizers. So there are these different contexts in which these cities are operating. So in this context, when we give a solution for wastewater treatment, we typically propose that, okay, if there is a possibility, if there is budget, maybe the very densely populated core areas, if they have a provision, we can create a centralized systems and just the pipe network there, and maybe slightly in the outskirts, we can have a centralized network. If there is, of course, the constraint is always whether there is space, whether there is budget. The other one is if the whole peripheries and whole places where there is just septic tanks, how do we service the sludge of those tanks? The whole that goes to a different subset within wastewater management, that's called fecal sludge management. Essentially means how do we ensure that safely the sludge within the pit latrines and the septic tanks, that's being collected safely and transported to a treatment plant that is either specifically designed for them or maybe into a centralized sewer. And of course, in the places where it is possible, go for a smaller scale network system. For example, if there are upcoming communities, if there are schools or institutions like hospitals or whatever buildings are there, if possible, beyond a particular unit, you promote them to ensure there is a small scale wastewater treatment plant within the premises, and then they reuse it in situ. Just to give you one example, the city of Bangalore in India, there are more than 400 to 500 small scale sewage treatment plants. You do have most of the city that is networked to the larger centralized sewage treatment plant, but you also have these 500, 600 apartments and complexes which are connected to their own little sewage treatment plant, and the water is reused within the same premises for toilet flushing and irrigation and gardening. So there are these systems which are already existing. And of course, the peripheral areas, you are still have this dependence on septic tanks and pits. So what I'm saying here, and the planning for different cities, that is already happening to some extent in different cities, and they exist in different forms. There is, however, no doubt that there are gaps within the value chain. At some places, there is leakage from the pipes. At some places, there is no safe disposal areas. There are places where the systems are overwhelmed. There are places where the tankers are not cleaning, and then you have unsafe cleaning practices. But the point is, the whole approach of wastewater management in these contexts is to ensure that all the different kind of settlements, they are catered to and their needs are being fulfilled in a economical as well as environmentally safe way. So, some context about my journey. So one is working in India, which is all about working in multiple settings. Just to give you a context, Mumbai is one of the richest cities in India. There are very rich people living there in high rises, people living in bungalows. The Bollywood is there. But at the same time, the reality is 50% of the population lives in slums, and they have very minimal access to water and sanitation. So you have this whole thing. So in the same city, you might need very different solutions for different places. Then we have very high resources in the same city. Some pockets will have very high resources. Some pockets will have very less resources. So very diverse kind of settings we are working in. When it came to Afghanistan, the whole solution was how do we quickly deploy the solution? Of course, the context I'm talking about is back in 2017-18, where there was still quite a bit of access for foreign experts to go there and help development professionals to help out on some of these infrastructure issues. But even then, the whole thing was driven by urgency. They were having huge influx of people coming from the rural and peri-urban areas into the cities, like the safe cities like Kabul. They were just overwhelming with people. And it was not possible for them to expand the infrastructure at that pace. So it was like, how quickly do we cater to the people? The third is Tanzania, where we worked it was all about that it's a developing country and the overall setting is very low resource setting, and how do we make it work for them. Yet, one similarity that was there across is that very rapidly growing urban centers, all of these places. And as I explained earlier, there are different sort of systems existing in the same space. And you have constraints of different kind of resources, whether it's money, whether it's water as a resource, or whether it's soil degradation. So you have these problems existing at the same thing, a same space. Coming back to how does this then leave the whole planning for wastewater and circularity, we are talking about how do you operationalize the plan that you will be submitting to the government, to the local government. What are the elements, what is the thought process that drives this plan? First is we have to always think about more than just technical feasibility. If a solution is technically feasible, it will treat the wastewater, it will meet all the environmental parameters, yet is it necessarily financially viable? Can the local authorities, do they have the funds to maintain it? Do they have the skill sets to maintain it? Can they spend? So many times what happens is that maybe some of the grants or maybe some of the central government funding, the larger central government or the provincial funding, a big chunk of funding can address the capital expenditure, but the operational expenditure is almost always expected to be met by the very crash-strapped local municipalities. So we have to always understand, okay, we have a huge budget for capital, but for operational expense, it has to be as bare minimum as possible, because that was the context they were working in. Social acceptability of the solution, where we are situating, what kind of solution, what kind of reuse. The planning for where do we dispose the treated sludge, where do we dispose the treated effluent, that itself is a huge determinant of what kind of technology is possible in a particular situation. And then the very important part of driving this discussion was how do we ensure that even after all this, the wastewater is treated as close to the source as possible, so as that it reduces both the cost of transportation and cost of carbon footprint. So both of these things have to be as close to the source as possible. And of course, integrating and getting all the stakeholders, right from the sanitation workers and the users to the bureaucrats and the political leaders on the same page. So working within this, there were some examples I just wanted to share. So first example was from Tanzania. So we were designing this sludge treatment plant to treat the sludge from pit latrines and septic tanks. And we asked, so in context like India, because most of the people cook vegetables before they eat. So even if treated sewage sludge is used in some of the food crops, since most of the people cook and eat, it doesn't pose a threat. Of course, for salad vegetables, it's not to be used, but then for most of the other vegetables, when it's cooked, there is almost no harm to the human health. But in a context like Tanzania, where they mostly have vegetables which are either eaten as salads or eaten with very minimal cooking, we had to ensure that the sludge could be only used for non-food crops. So we actually went on to identify the potential farmers who might be wanting to use it, what kind of space crops that can be grown in such kind of situations. So we went to identify that because their culture, the cultural context was different. The second part, in India, we are talking about, again, extensive stakeholder consultation. There was this one time where, again, as I was mentioning earlier, that there was this fear among some residents in a particular locality that because the sewage trucks will be going on the same road as where their houses are, their house values will go down and then they will get a lot of smell. So we literally had to meet those people and then bring some of those local leaders to a functioning treatment plant about 3,000 kilometers away. We had to fly them down and then show them around that, hey, no, this is the demonstration, and then there is no smell here. Your land value will not go down. There will not be any issue. So getting those buy-in, listening to people, and then trying to address those concerns and ensuring that things come together, that has been one of the very important learnings for me. Multiple solutions in the same city. I have already covered Bangalore. Back then, back in 2017-18, when we were working, the Bhubaneswar city still didn't have a centralized sewage treatment plant. So we had to kind of propose that, okay, for a time being, you can have a sludge treatment plant. Then later on, you can, in a modular way, go for a larger treatment plant that is centralized. So we had to give different solutions for different places. Then coming to the place called Afghanistan. Well, back in 2018, as I mentioned, even then we had like the humanitarian situation that was there. But even the weather over there was very extreme. Like it used to snow and go below like minus 3 to 4 degrees, 5 degrees. That was the kind of situation we were operating in. Given the situation, we did make a field trip there, but then apart from that, most of the times we had to just do backstopping. We would be talking to the team on the ground, use local people who had access to those communities, who were trusted, because in such kind of humanitarian situation, trust is always an issue. So we have to ensure that the people who are going on the ground, they are locals, they are trusted, and then they don't face any issue when they are doing their field service. And use local resources. We couldn't recommend any high-end technology to them, and we had to ensure that whatever recommendation for treatment we are doing, that is easily deliverable on this particular site using the local resources that they have. So now we are talking about the case for nature-based solutions. So in this context where we are talking about cash-strapped local municipalities, we are talking about using local resources, things being very, very easy to operate. This is where your nature-based solutions come in place. How? Firstly, they are passive designs. They use very minimal external inputs such as electricity or chemicals or any kind of consumables, very minimal. They can operate in very limited skill sets. You can train somebody who is just literate enough, you can train them in such situations. So in any kind of places where you have like lack of skills, even there you can train those, like the operator can be a low skilled person and they can be trained to operate these places. So that is a huge benefit of why such solutions are being deployed in the developing context. They are very easy to maintain. They can be always designed in a very modular space. Like it can be designed for as low as just maybe 1,000 liters per day. Okay, and then can be designed up to 1 million liters or even more. They can be expanded in a modular way. So given the physical and economic constraints, it can always be scaled down or scaled up. They are very aesthetics, and that helps in the acceptance and acceptability of such solutions. They are very low in footprint, of course, because they are hardly any external. So the only footprint you will be having will be the embodied carbon that you will be having when you are building those plants. But apart from that, you will be having very little footprint that is ongoing, and promotes biodiversity, because these technologies or these treatment systems, I would say, they integrate natural elements like plants, like water. It will always attract biodiversity to the particular place. So, which is again something that supports. Then we are talking about some types of nature-based solutions. I'm just giving some introduction. One is that if you notice some very interesting part, that you have these plants again. You have, of course, the technicalities is that you have the influent, the oxygen comes here, and then you have the treatment. The plants uptake the nutrients, and then the treated water goes out. Now, something on a very similar way, you will find again, the water comes in, then there are these filter media, you have the plants, and then the water goes out. There might be variations in the approaches, but in essence, nature-based solutions will always have plants, will always have a place where the water is initially coming, you are letting it settle for some time. You'll have one part of the system that is operating without oxygen, one part of the system that is operating with oxygen through the plants, through the nodules in the roots of the plants. They enrich the water with oxygen. So there are certain aspects of these systems that can be put below the ground. Some will be above the ground. Again, a similar, I would say something inspired from phytorate, and this is one particular type of, I would say, system in which, again, you have these initial parts of the treatment system which are below the ground, which are operating without oxygen, anaerobic system which are operating without any oxygen, and the ones above the ground which are, and the water is enriched by the plants, and the oxygen is enriched into the water by the plants. The aerobic bacteria works there, and again in the final stages you have the ponds, which again there is aeration, there is oxygen. So even these have the same. Some modules are below the ground, some modules are above the ground. There is plant, there is a water element. Why this is important? I just wanted to show you how these systems they finally look. This is a system that was deployed at a place called in southern India, in Pondicherry, called Arvindai Hospital, where they basically, again, this water, that is the water element, and this is a treatment ecosystem. Many of these plants, they are also part of the treatment ecosystem. What I'm saying, that it can be easily integrated into the background, into the landscaping. So you are utilizing some land, which is true. It can always appear as if these nature-based systems are using more space than a conventional electromechanical system. But at the same time, they can be beautifully integrated into the landscape. Having said that, there are ways to also reduce the footprint of the land footprint of the nature-based system, which I'll come to later on. Again, this is another aspect in the southern city of Coimbatore, southern Indian city of Coimbatore, where these plants that you see next to the water, next to the lake, these are used to treat the water. Then there are modules below the surface. Again, something that is integrated beautifully, and then this whole place is a park. People are using it. It's part of the urban placemaking. It's part of the community. This is something that was used to treat the sludge from septic tanks and pit latrines. And then here, again, you can see there are plants. And then these are, again, they are treating. And then somewhere here, there is a water feature as well. Having said that, yes, there is some of the drawbacks that we are talking about, that the area requirement for nature-based system can be slightly higher. It is more suitable for the smaller scale systems and decentralized systems. And then we are talking about perception management. So in many places, because these use very little bit of electromechanical equipments, the whole perception, will it really work? It's only when you have been to a certain number of nature-based systems, you realize that they do work. And then it's really sometimes just about the perception management. Now, just coming to the UAE context, in UAE, you do have skills. You do have enough energy, but is there still a place for nature-based systems? Before getting into that, I wanted to talk about the macro changes that we have had in UAE in the last few years. Firstly, there is a deep commitment. There's a deep commitment towards net zero. We are talking about that buildings are an important element of reaching net zero by 2050. You have rapidly growing population, which includes, just an example, that cities like Dubai, the population has grown 300% between 2000 to 2024, which is not even 3 decades. So and the population is projected to reach something like 26 million by 2100. So it's very rapid increase in population, particularly for a place which is situated in an arid region, in practically most of the country is desert, and you are having very high population stress. Because of the high heat and aridity, we are also one of the highest in UAE. It's one of the highest per capita water use. I just want to stop there, because It's like, if I just to give you a context, the UAE water use is 550 liters per capita per day. While if you just compare the same numbers in India, it is the recommended or the aspirational per capita per day water use in India for the cities. The recommended one is only 130 liters per capita per day. So UAE is what then about uh, 2 to 3 times higher than it's about 3 to 4 times higher than in India. So why does happen? Because we are talking about centralized cooling systems. A lot of the water that is used in UAE is just for the cooling system. Because the city has expanded, there is also a focus also to combat the urban heat. There is a focus to increase the green spaces. Cities like Dubai, they are doubling their green spaces by 2040. They are talking about doubling their green spaces. So we are talking about a lot of water use even there. And the rising heat, as we are talking about rising annually, the heat that is increasing, that's more than like 1.5 to 2 degrees. So it's a lot of, like, so it's already a hot climate. We are talking about it's become even more hotter in the future. In this context, we are having the wastewater management, existing wastewater management systems in UAE. So mostly it is centralized sewer systems, which are piped. But when it comes to the reuse, UAE is doing a good job in reuse. But the whole reuse, the way it happens is just sending tankers into the centralized systems. Just to give you an example, if there is a centralized system in a place like Jebel Ali and it has to bring the water to a place like, say, Al Nahda in the northern side of Dubai. From the southern side of Dubai, it's like almost a 40 to 50 kilometer stretch. And these are all the wastewater across UAE. Most of the time, it is just the treated wastewater. For reuse, it is transported by tankers. So we are having wastewater reuse, but most of the times it's just the way it is conveyed, the treated water, the treated sewage effluent, as they call it, the TSE, the way it is conveyed, it's usually through tankers. And these tankers are all fossil fuel run, so there's a huge footprint there. Having said that, there are some examples of decentralized smaller scale STPs. We are talking about places like your Palm Jumeirah, which is a little bit away from the main Dubai city. It's slightly it's like a different island on the man-made island on the sea. You have a treatment plant over there. You have a slightly remotely located community like the Barari, which has a treatment plant within their whole community. Yet these examples are small, and typically these places are using electromechanical systems only. So while that is happening, the footprint of the wastewater treatment is much lower. But then, of course, because they are using electromechanical systems, there is this trade-off we are talking about. There is a regulatory encouragement, of course, under the different regulations like Estidama in Abu Dhabi, Green Building Al Safat in Dubai, and the overall UAE guidelines and framework for sustainable buildings. We are talking about mandating use of treated sewage water for certain use cases, such as your irrigation, particularly, and then encouraging it for your construction, and then encouraging new developments to have their own sewage treatment plants. And because we are saying about reuse, I had to mention this thing about Miracle Garden in Dubai, which is one of the largest wastewater irrigated gardens in the world. It's huge. And this is an achievement. The only thing is that the water that is used here, that again gets transported by tankers from different centralized STPs. So again, there is a whole transport cost. Hence, that brings us to why do we still need to integrate NBS in UAE? We are having electromechanical systems, of course, but then we are talking about if we integrate NBS, the benefits are very evident. One is instantly the environmental footprint is reduced. Secondly, because you will be having NBS on a smaller scale within the communities, it is going to enable in situ reuse within the premises. And there is a very direct improvement of the microclimatic within the communities because of the use of extensive plants, your water features that would reduce the temperature of those particular communities, and at least by 1 to 2 degrees. In some cases, like we have seen in Barari, where it's like extensively greened community, there are studies that report it to be lesser than the surrounding areas by up to 3 to 4 degrees. So integrating water and plant features within a particular landscape, and then we can use that to double as a nature-based system for the wastewater. If everything can be done together, that reduces the temperature than the surrounding areas, and then of course contributes to the aesthetics, contributes to more public buying, increases the asset value. So we are talking about these benefits that come along with integrating NBS in UAE. Next, how do we really integrate? One is that, as I was showing in the previous slides, some parts of these systems will be below the ground, will be anaerobic, with operating without oxygen. Some parts will be above the ground, operating with oxygen. The parts that are below the ground can always double up. The surfaces above can always be used as car parkings. And just to give you a perspective, for users, it is like parking your car over the sewage manhole or drainage hole. So you can basically create this sturdy top layers, and then you can just integrate with the road networks within the community, and you can park your car. So below the parking, that's a very common practice in places like India, where you have these the anaerobic parts located below the ground, below the parking spaces. That's one way. Integrating it with local water features. So as I was mentioning that the irrigation in UAE is already happening through treated sewage, but then to do that irrigation, one has to transport the water all the way from the treatment plants in tankers and then fill those ponds. So, for example, Dubai has about 5 pond parks. They are large scale community parks, and these water that we see, it's all treated wastewater, but it has to be transported from a different place. It is not the treatment plant is not located here anywhere nearby. What if the treatment plant is located very close to, so that the transport cost is reduced? Next, so if there is further space constraints, even vertically, some of these systems can be designed. In situ reuse is, of course, if the treatment plant is located within a particular premises, they can be used directly for things like toilet flushing, things like the chillers that is contributing to the massive water use in UAE. That can be directly, the chiller water can be directly drawn from the treated wastewater. Already in many places, it's the treated wastewater is used for the chillers. The thing is, if we integrate it with NBS, then directly the footprint goes down significantly. And of course, using it for irrigation. With this, I would just like to end my presentation saying that a lot of time we do have a lot of possibilities, and UAE is doing quite a bit of things. It's just that if we move a bit more towards, and we change the approach in which we are currently treating and managing and reusing the wastewater, then we can very easily reduce the footprint of the built environment, because water is one of the significant contributor to the whole carbon footprint of the built environment. So if we can deal with this part using NBS, we can reduce the footprint, and then that is a very important contributor to our policy goal of net zero. That's an important contributor to improving the asset value, and then creating a more pleasant environment for people. So that's how I would like to end my presentation. And this is my contact details. Happy to connect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Devishna. That was a very insightful presentation. It's a bit of an eye-opener also to see the overview of how wastewater circularity actually comes full circle. And especially when we were able to see it through the comparative between India, Tanzania, Afghanistan, and then finally the UAE. It was very interesting because each of these have their own kind of process of evolution over the many years. And while some are very young but technologically advanced, and some are very old and have their own learnings and adaptations. What really stood out for me was how you connected the technical feasibility to social behavior and also the governance gaps. Because when we're talking about desert regions, sustainability isn't just about the engineering, and that's what we hear about, but it's also very much about the people or the policy and how the culture, all of these working together. And also one of the things you highlighted, um, which we often forget, is that water scarcity in arid regions isn't only a resource issue, it's also a systems issue.
Yes.
And your examples of how decentralized models or nature based models and the different reuse pathways, um, along with their own operational challenges, kind of came out very clearly, and we could see how these aspects come up and can be used in a practical way. So, with that context, let's now move to design region focused Q&A,
Sure.
where we'll build directly on some of the themes that you outlined. So, shall we move into the Q&A round then?
Sure.
All right. So, my first question to you is about water scarcity and desert challenges. So, desert regions, like in the UAE, often face water scarcity and high per capita consumption, as you very rightly pointed out. So, how can wastewater circularity help close this water gap for us in the desert?
Yes, as I mentioned, the direct use, like don't use potable water for non-potable purposes. I think that is a very direct first step, and that is policy-wise we are already there. There is definite encouragement and mandate for the new constructions. The problem is in the older areas where you don't have like the double planting, and they have been around say 20, 30 years back, and they still have another 20, 30 years of life. So at that point of time, maybe the thought process was not so evolved. As a result, those are the places where you still have the challenges. uh, so if I have to focus, I'm like, how do we reduce the use of potable water for non-potable uses, whether it's toilet flushing, whether it's your irrigation, your like the quality of treated wastewater is all, if it's like to the standard that it can be used directly for things like construction, something that the mandates and the policies are already trying to push forward. If that is a compulsory thing, it will help to bring down the whole use of fresh water drastically. So yes, it's all about avoiding use of fresh water for anything that is not directly touching the human skin and human mouth. Just the principle is don't use fresh water for that, use treated wastewater for that. That will, if that is a grinding principle, it will just help us reduce our water consumption a lot.
Super. So essentially, while water was just water earlier, we now make a clear differentiation between the two and consume them differently,
Yes,
between fresh and reused, and also being a very high construction, high construction volume. Water being a major resource in the construction process, we can be a little more conservative or calculated with the consumption of water and the type of water there.
absolutely.
Super. Moving to my next question. With rising temperatures, as we know, with climate change, we're expecting, you know, a, 1, 2 degree rise. We don't know how much, but with the increasing temperatures, how does this heat stress affect the way we manage our wastewater systems? How does it affect the performance of these wastewater treatment systems? And is it going to reduce the potential for reuse in desert climates?
Potential to reuse, absolutely, it's going to increase. So that's I mean, that's definitely there. How it's going to impact. So as your temperatures rise, you will have this thing. If it's an electromechanical system where there's a lot of need for aerobic bacteria, and then you have this aeration and everything. So in just to give in a very layperson term, we are talking about operating those aerators continuously, and then they any kind of machine, when it kind of operates, there's heat. But then we are talking about now the ambient temperature, the temperatures are going crazy. So the amount of energy then you will need for these electromechanical systems many times to function optimally might increase. That might be a direct thing, which is where it brings us, like, in certain cases, can we optimize it by adding more nature based solutions? Or in the same treatment plan, can we have a hybrid model? Some places where it makes more sense, use the electromechanical. Some places where it can be optimized, maybe just go for nature based. So the overall energy use of a treatment plan can be very optimally managed in especially the context of higher temperatures. We can just optimize those energy use in those particular contexts.
Got it. So, by working on the actual plants to improve our efficiency, we can adapt to the change in temperatures. All
Yes.
right. So, my next question is about infrastructure and feasibility. So, most desert cities rely heavily on centralized systems. What are the risks of depending on centralized wastewater plants in rapidly growing desert cities?
Right. So, in rapidly, any place where the population is growing very high, there is a chance that eventually there might be a mismatch between the design capacity of the wastewater treatment conveyance mechanism, the pipe, the amount of water the pipes are designed to hold, versus the amount of water they're actually getting. So there is a chance that eventually down the line there might be a mismatch. So that is a direct challenge that in many urban centers they face, which is why you have this encouragement of going by on-site small scale STPs wherever possible, so that the pressures on the centralized systems that are reduced, and also it increases, yeah, encourages circularity within the systems, that reduces your footprint. So yes, so I do see that if any places the population is increasing at a very very high pace, there is a chance that eventually there will be a point in which the infrastructure will come under strain. So in order to offload the centralized infrastructure, which is still needed, but then you might need to encourage more and more decentralized infrastructure so that the pressure is reduced.
Fantastic. So, some amount of management or treatment at source
Yes.
will help create smaller nodes and take off the bulk of the load on one single
Right.
node, which can then fail uh,
Right.
at some point.
Right.
All right.
One of
So,
the clear direction where UA is going is like encouraging people to at least treat their gray water. Just to give context, gray water is wastewater, all the wastewater except the toilet wastewater. If we just remove that, which is the black water, if you remove the black water, all the other water, that's gray water. So encouraging gray water treatment and reuse in situ, that's a good initiative because it's also much simpler to treat. The pathogen load in the gray water is much less, so it's much easily treatable in situ. And then just ensuring that the toilet plumbing is directly connected to the sewer. So that's a good policy direction, but of course it's not a mandate yet, so we don't have too many projects right now, because of course there is a cost that is coming onto the developer when such kind of systems or the facility management that happens. So how do we firstly get a push from the consumer that, I want to stay in this kind of place because my then water bill goes down? That's one part of it. The other part is how do we kind of push for a more regulatory mandate so that this kind of systems become mainstream.
absolutely. I think you also pointed out very correctly that the water bill is a real thing, and so that's actually a good thing when we want to go ahead and enforce the mandate later. Unlike many of the other places that you pointed out, where water bills are almost negligible or considered as zero, and so it's
Exactly.
very hard to then push to actually make change happen. So I think where there is a direct cost to customer, uh, there would be some incentive, some value in actually going ahead and adopting some of these reuse mechanisms at the institute level.
Right.
Fantastic. So, how feasible is it to adopt decentralized or hybrid wastewater systems where space or soil type and also groundwater conditions are considered to be quite extreme, with extreme temperatures, too hot, too cold, rodents or invasive species of plants. There's so many kind of external factors as well to consider when kind of adopting these decentralized hybrid systems.
Right.
So, yeah,
So,
feasibility wise.
just some thoughts. So, firstly, when it comes to okay, typically in decentralized systems, you have this like plants such as Canna indica, and then there's elephant grass, which are used in a particular context. The thing is, of course, are there already plants in your particular geography, whether it's Dubai or Abu Dhabi? Are there already local plants that can do the same job? That's the first level of assessment. If that's not there, like in terms of the species, you just try to get the closest species that can adapt. Just to give a context, similar temperature to UAE, we have a province called Rajasthan in India, where the temperatures go in places like 50 degrees. So, and then decentralized nature based systems have been implemented there. So, it is definitely technically feasible. But of course, when we are talking about a situation where land is also premium and electricity is relatively more easily available, so we can always do the optimization by doing a hybrid system. And what kind of, when it comes to rodents, I have been to many of these decentralized and nature based systems. Rodents, they typically, the issue only comes during if there is a maintenance problem. It's not a design problem, it's only a maintenance problem. And then if we just can maintain it at the regular intervals, which is just very less, but then of course there is some maintenance. If the maintenance is done, there is no like pest or rodents issue most of the times.
Okay, okay, fine. So it's possible.
Absolutely.
Um, all right. So coming to the third part of my question series, I'm now going to ask you a few questions about nature-based solutions in arid climates, which you talked about quite in detail in your presentation, NBS. So, like phytorid or soil biotech or the DWATs, typically depend on vegetation and soil systems. How well do
Yes.
these perform in hot, dry, sandy, or salty, saline environments?
So some of these, they are then like, the amount of the spacing of the plants, you just ensure that they are created in a way that moisture is retained. That's one way. Can also have greenhouses so that the evaporate, because the major challenge in working in arid areas is that higher evaporation. Having said that, these kind of systems have been even implemented in places like Ladakh, which is a cold desert, and in places like proper desert areas in Rajasthan. So we have evidence that things have worked, but then there is a lot of time that goes during the design. You cannot just take a system from elsewhere. You have to think, put some thought on how do we reduce the evapotranspiration. Do you need sheds over modules which are typically open to sky? Do we need a shed over there? We have in fact done these cases that in places where it's on the other extreme, very high rainfall, cyclone prone, then you will need say shades over certain modules. Similarly, in other where the idea is to keep the rain out, in the on the other places where you want to keep the evapotranspiration at a minimal, then you need to maybe keep like a different kind of mechanism so as to reduce it.
Right, right. So some kind of protection for exposed system parts, which
Yes.
might be more susceptible to climate wear and tear,
Yes.
and designing for that, planning for that, along with response to temperatures for a particular kind of climate. So in this case, for the arid climates, we or for these kinds of um, very high variation in temperatures, we would look at what to do to protect the system from that.
Right.
But apart from that, it's something that we can very well manage, and it's something that is within our control.
Absolutely.
All right. So moving to my next question, where I'm talking about reuse priorities in desert regions. So, what forms of wastewater reuse, irrigation, cooling, toilet flushing, groundwater recharge, what are most suitable for the desert environments, in your opinion?
So most suitable, I think we have some very good examples here in UAE where for the landscaping, and UAE is one of the few countries where urbanization contributed to increase in green spaces. In most other places, we have the green spaces reducing. It's one of the unique places where the green spaces are increasing because of urbanization. It's very interesting. So I think absolutely in desert climates, there's a lot of need for shed. There's a lot of need for making the outdoors easily walkable and accessible to people. So well, in those cases, that's why the number one priority is definitely the green spaces. But at the same time, at a very private individual level, you need even in desert climate or otherwise, the toilet flushing should be from the treated wastewater. The other ways, if the chillers can be done. So I think, yeah, as I mentioned, and of course, if we can mandate it for things like, because UAE is a construction hub for things like construction, if we can push that more, that will be great place to start with, prioritizing where we want to reuse the wastewater.
All right. So now another thing that you talked about, which was about how the green space is going to double at the city level, and coupling that idea with the idea of reuse for water and the example of what you showed at Discovery Gardens, I think,
The
or
miracle
was it
garden, yeah.
Miracle
The
Gardens? Miracle Gardens. I'm just thinking about how would it be possible to kind of expand green spaces in the city without overstressing the water infrastructure at its
right.
current pace.
Right. I think one way is to, whenever there are new developments that are coming up, you mandate some sort of a green space around the development, and then we can, if wherever we can. Of course, it's not going to be possible in the central business district or some of the older places. But then, wherever there are new spaces coming up, how do we encourage greening of the space, and then encourage the use of nature-based solutions so that the treatment and the greening happens at the same time? Because right now, it's not that greening is not happening. Right now the major issue is the whole transportation from long distances. Like you have these trucks that are just bringing treated wastewater from centralized plants and then going all over the city. That's a huge footprint that we have. So that is something that needs to be reduced. So
All
basically,
right.
in situ treatment and reuse, I think that's a very important direction to move.
Fantastic. Um, my next question is about communities and designing for these desert communities. Um, Desert cities face a high evaporation rate, and when we're designing systems, how can these systems be designed to minimize this evaporative loss, and especially during the time of treatment and reuse? Is there any way that we can specifically work at keeping evaporation losses of this water to a minimum?
Right. One is, of course, the pre-treatment that can be all done underground. That's a good way to start with, reducing the thing. It's also the whole anaerobic treatment phase, which you keep under the ground so that there is minimal loss. That's one thing. The challenge, it always comes once come out of the ground to the surface where you have the plants, and that's where there might be times where your plants are kind of uh, they are getting going dry. There are these very real challenges which are also there. The whole design then goes of course, how the plants are, what kind of plants are being used. At the same time, if if there is no other way and the plants really need some additional water, can we have a system in which the plants are directly drawing from the end place where the effluent is going out? Can they directly draw from that, and then the plants, so that the plants then they can survive? The green plants that we are putting for the treatment, they can survive. So at times that has happened, but the point is that how do we in order to minimize the loss, one is that the first basis of the treatment that goes all below the ground. The later stages, we kind of design it, plan for it during the design stages. And still, if there is a risk, then we have the risk mitigation of using it from the treated wastewater. We just reuse it in the plant so that that system works. That happens. So that's a risk. There is a way to like mitigate the risk as well.
Got it. So, in many desert regions, tanker based systems are very common. And what are the operational challenges of transporting treated sewage effluent by tankers in the extreme heat?
One, I think just to start with, one is the high footprint that's there because, of course, you are moving in extreme heat. You need to keep the whole system cool. You will need air conditioning within the, like, not just the driver's cabin, but also ensure there is sufficient insulation and everything. That's one part. It contributes because we are talking about the Gulf cities where the population is increasing, the traffic by these huge tankers that keep moving around contributes to the chaos. So it's very difficult that way because then you are having these wheels which can be actually avoided in a way. So yeah, those are the change. First, plus of course, it's a person, so it's a logistical thing. When you want, if there is a emergency that okay, there is something that your water, your immediately you need water in your place, then you need to call somebody, and then there is a time lag for like when the water comes, and then when the water, like when you get that treated, when your demand is met, so there is a time lag. So these are the very practical challenges. There might be absenteeism, and there might be like the whole because of course there are people, and then there will be ups and all. It's like any other supply chain. There are like the usual supply chain shocks that might be there. There might be times in which there are other competing interests, that okay, you are generating wastewater, but the city, for example, is having a different construction which needs more wastewater, so then competing interests, so the water just goes there, and your place which needs treated wastewater, it is not having, because then either the price is going up and then you are not able to afford. So because you are bringing it from a distance, it's just that it's not under your control. So that's what I mean, that there will be always other demands for the wastewater that can also be there.
All right. Now, my last section is about policy, culture, and community. Um, so, perception issues are stronger in desert societies where fresh water is considered very precious. So, how can we improve the public trust in use of treated wastewater? Especially at least like we said, as long as it's for non-portable use, wastewater is something that can is an easy plug-in to kind of create a circularity loop. So how do we work with the idea of trust, or public trust in the idea of reused wastewater?
Right. As I was saying, of course, the first thing I think you have already touched upon, that awareness is like, it's okay to use treated wastewater. A lot of people in UAE, they don't know that the public pond parks where people love their morning walks and their jogs and they are going there regularly, a lot of people don't know that the water there is treated wastewater. Of course, what happens is that any place, it will have some of the operational challenges. Okay, at times there may be maybe a few days in the year where you might get a little bit smell, right? And then when that hits people, oh, is it bad? Is it like out of like it is something that I shouldn't go there? I think that's where the awareness gap is. It's like, okay, you are not drinking that water, and then if there is a nuisance, you can always like Dubai, I would say, at least because I stay close to a public pond park and I go there very regularly. And then, of course, there are times when you have these issues, and then one call, and within 1 hour, the municipality is responsive enough to address that. So that's a good thing about UAE. So the point is, it's about the trust that, okay, I'm not drinking that, so it is A, not a problem. B, even if there is some bit of nuisance, then it can be easily and promptly addressed. I think this awareness gap is huge because it is like, no wastewater. It's like a very strong aversion that people have. So I think that's where the whole thing is, let's to start that, it's okay to use your treated wastewater in all of these aspects. It's okay to use. It's already being used, but then if the public knowledge is increased, there will be more acceptance to using treated wastewater for more user connected things like your flushing, because people are like, oh, In my washroom it's not coming, I was just saying that a lot of thing is here. It's just about the whole awareness, and then the will, because if you have the awareness, then you'll be like, okay, then I can pay my facility management to put that dual plumbing in my building, so that my flushed water tank is not the portable one, not it's like the treated sewage, and I'm okay with that.
Right, right. I think definitely it's a system change as well, and that actually plays a driving role. Even where we stay, in fact, there is all of the gardening which has been now kind of set up through watering systems for plants. Is all reused water, and when you go out for a walk in the evening, you can immediately tell that there's a bit of a smell in the air. But then I think it's within a bearable amount to some extent, and after a point when you, especially for someone like me who knows that this is a good thing and it's ultimately going to support the plants and it's not something that needs to be portable, then it's a good thing. But I think overall also it's just once you get used to it, or once people see it as a normal occurrence, it kind of becomes the norm and acceptable.
Yes.
So
And
I
also,
think
I
that
mean, here I would say the responsiveness is very high. Like if there is a smell, you can always complain. And they literally, I have never had a time when they took more than 2 hours to solve that. They say, "Oh, I will take time," but they actually typically, I have done like few times, and it's like within 2 hours it's resolved. And they will also say, "Hey, ma'am, how can you go back and check? Is this okay?" So that's the responsiveness we are talking about. So I
fantastic,
think the
fantastic.
only
Yeah.
thing we need is like the whole awareness bit, that I know if there is even an issue, there is always a mitigation.
Right, and also the fact that these water-based systems are also going to bring down temperature. I think the overall feeling of a lower temperature as an experience, especially in the hot climate of the desert, is such a relief to everyone that somewhere in one's mind also, these are the kind of things, the respite that one gets from the heat. This
Absolutely.
actually kind of makes it in your mind a trade-off or something where you're like, it's okay,
Right.
I'll let that go because it's
Right.
serving such a large community, such a large landmass, which is otherwise just paved, right? Which is going to
Right.
absorb heat and store heat, thermal mass for the whole community and takes so much longer to cool down. Whereas here, the pond becomes a heat sink for the entire
Right.
community. It's able to, drain out all the heat of the paved roads and footpaths into this water body and brings down temperatures early enough for everyone to enjoy the outdoors. So I
Absolutely.
think
Just to add to
these are
that,
things.
we do have these places where, as I was talking about, I live next to the Barsha Pond Park, and then even if you go in, say, the peak summer, like the month of July at 1 o'clock, I have been able to walk there at like, and then work there under a tree, under a palm tree at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because it was still pleasant and cool, and you can still, like, you don't feel like it's that hot. So the whole bearability and the whole, the like, okay, it's like, it's a very, it becomes a community center, it becomes a place where it is still, you feel like, respite during the day. So it's really pleasant spaces, and then it improves the outdoor engagement and walkability wherever these kind of spaces are integrated.
Fantastic, fantastic. So I think all green flags all around. I think the idea that it's possible to create these kind of spaces where wastewater integrates with creating these public spaces which are more comfortable, kind of gives us hope that this is something that can replicate and can be done in more and more new developments. Hopefully, it becomes mandatory as well, and people begin to accept this more and more as part of their living in the desert.
Sure.
So, my final question to you is: what policy changes or incentives would most accelerate wastewater circularity adoption across the desert regions, whether it's the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, any of these places in the Middle East? Uh, any thoughts on that from your point of view?
Well, I think one is the consumer. Like, what is it that the price the consumer is paying? If the fresh water, like, what is the price for a fresh water versus, since the water is typically billed, how much of a reduction in the bills the consumers are visibly able to see. What are the incentives or say subsidies? Because initially you might have to give some subsidies. If an apartment is having a circular system, what is the benefit that is being passed on to the consumer? Because then there can be a push from the ground. Then if there is a push from the above, is of course we are talking about mandating some of these things, making it very compulsory in many of these new developments. Not only because right now the thing is that it is there, but the mandate is such that okay, it's still an optional, but only if you want to receive a higher rating in the building system, that's where you have to go for this kind of circular system. Currently, for just coming up with a building, you don't need to. So the awareness on the part of and the market demand has to be eventually that okay, why do I need to pay maybe slightly more if the builder is taking the initiative to invest on circular water systems, or the facility management is using systems to implement circular water system? What is the benefit that the consumer will get? And if the consumer has to pay slightly higher for that, what is the eventual trade-off that they are dealing with? Are they getting is it like more secure water source, or is it more like eventually their water bills come down, so even if they pay slightly higher in the upfront, they are actually saving quite a bit in the water? So what is the trade-off we are talking for the consumers? What is the trade-off we are talking for the builder? So it all boils down that if this policy mandate moves, of course, policy mandate itself is a big thing, but then just to push it from the market side, it has to be that what is the benefit for both the sides that they are getting. And of course, the policy mandate has to be there more and more in order to ensure that all the new buildings they are using, for most of the non-potable users, they are using TSE, and then they are, as far as possible, having an in-situ plant. So that's what I would say.
Fantastic. So that was the last of my moderated questions. We'll now shift into our audience Q&A. If you have a question about water reuse, circularity, or anything we've just covered to the audience, please drop it in the chat. Let's hear very quickly from the audience now. Okay, so the first question we have is from Mandar. Can treated water be supplied to neighborhoods via a pipeline?
Absolutely. It can be done. It just depends on how far is your treatment plant. That's why if the treatment plant is very close by, it's very easy. But if it's like very far away at one corner of the city, it is prohibitively costly to kind of transport have, because then you need the dual plumbing for the whole city. If we are having the treatment plant within the premises or within the community, then the cost of having the other pipeline that is carrying your treated wastewater, it is just less. So depends on where your treatment plant is.
All right. I hope that answers your question, Mandar. Okay, we have another question. Is it efficient to supply treated water, as many buildings need treated water for it to be used in mechanical cooling systems?
Of course, it is efficient and less connected to the previous thing. Just all boils down to the cost of transportation, where it is, and of course, it is already being done in certain places, but then it's on the trucks. If we want to be environmentally efficient, then the long-term solution is finding a way to transport it through pipes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mandar.
All right. Super. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mandar. Do we have any questions from any of the other audience members? All right. So hopefully we'll have more questions coming in over the week as we post this and share this with more people. Come and view this webinar. In the meantime, I'd just like to ask you for one last thought to a younger audience who are aspiring designers or urban planners and architects. What would your one message be to the younger audience about what they should think about when they're thinking about water?
Okay. Well, just always remember that water is finite. It's very expensive to generate water for use of so if we always bear that in mind, we need to think about how do we increase the use of the same water that is being one created for use. So I would say circularity becomes a value when you first understand that how much of value is needed in order to uh, create that water. What is the cost of creating water for supplying to houses? When you are opening your tap, if you know how much of cost of that water, you'll always know that okay, if it's going down the drain, 80% is already going down the drain. How can we ensure that we get the maximum value by reusing that 80%? And then because that is beneficial both in terms of the environmental foot reducing the environmental footprint as well as bringing down your cost. So I think if you just keep these two things in mind, and the third thing is that is very important: that what are the needs of your particular community, whoever you are designing for, whether it's a builder, whether it's a community, whether it's the government, whoever you are designing for. What is it that their overall operating framework is? Is it like what are the costs? What are the social issues? What are the how do we ensure that they feel involved in the process and then their needs are being met? So yeah, have a listening ear to your client and then also think about the whole environmental and economic cost of everything. Yeah, I think that's where I would start with. And yeah, that's how you go for choosing your technology. Nature-based solution, they are definitely efficient in some of the cases, but then what is the right fit for you? Whether nature-based, fully hybrid, mechanical, that is something you need to judge based on the operating constraints you have.
All right. Devisha, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. Your clarity, practicality, and your hands on experience working across all these different regions really helped us to ground the conversation, especially for a topic as crucial as wastewater circularity in desert environments. To everyone who joined us live, thank you for your time, curiosity, and thoughtful engagement. We'll see you next Sunday for another episode of Designing for the Desert. Until then, stay curious, stay climate conscious, and keep designing with purpose. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Udit. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for having me here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.